Hello. So it's been a while, but I thought it was time I did another video. Now, a while ago I released a video regarding the upgrading your Wanhao and Maker Select printers and all the clones, the Plus versions. Upgrading the firmware, installing BL Touch, and so on. With this firmware, ADVi3++, the problem is, actually shortly after I made that video, this project went into a basically pay-only state. You could not get pre-built firmwares for the controller board, and you cannot get the LCD panel firmware at all anymore without paying the creators Andrivet through Patreon, I believe. Yeah, and I've had a lot of questions about that on my YouTube channel. So what I decided to do is I'm gonna pre-build all this stuff for you, because it's actually, the source code is still available for the controller board firmware, but unfortunately the LCD panel firmware, the newest version there is 3.0.2, and he's up to 4 point something today. So this is gonna be an older version of the firmware, and yeah, you won't be able to get all the latest and greatest updates that he has implemented in his firmware. Also, I would like to say that I have tested it, but I have done minimal testing on this. I'm not gonna give any support on this. I'm just making it available, so you have the option to use this firmware, and know how to, and I'll show you how to build it yourself if you want to tinker with it. But if you want all the greatest and latest features, and you want support on it as well, and something that's probably been tested a bit more than what I'm dishing out here, then you should go and support the official project here. Basically just Google ADVi3++, and you should find it. Okay, so, well, what's the state? Like I said, he may stop making the pre-built firmwares available after this version 3.0.2. I've gone ahead and cloned the repositories on GitHub at that point, or, well, actually the newest version as in regards to the firmware. So you can find those on GitHub as well. I'll link them down in the description of this video. I have pre-built the firmware for the control board, and I have also made a package available for the LCD. The LCD is actually just a folder in the project that you need to copy onto an SD card. I've made a little change just for funsies, which we'll look at later. So you can go and download these and stick it on your printer and have something that's at least better than the stock Wanhao firmware, in my opinion. Although do note, these do not support the Mark II version of the Wanhao i3 Plus. Only the Mark I version, but there is an option for a BL Touch sensor in here. Again, I'm not entirely sure which version of the BL Touch. I'm not too much up to date on that, so you might have to look into that. And like I said here in, let's see, this description, this is built from the version of the source code from the 10th of June 2018, which is not what is linked down here. I don't know how to fix that. So if you want to do it yourself, you'll need to go to browse the code, go into commits, and then there's been a lot of stuff going on in this project since then. Go all the way back to that date to find it. Then you can download the repository at that state and build it yourself. And in order to build it yourself, you need Visual Studio Code, which I have installed here. Then you also need an extension called, which is here, Platform.io. You find that by going through clicking this button, extensions, and then just search for Platform.io Platform.io IDE it's called, and then I've already installed it, otherwise there'll be an install button right here. I'll take a little while to install. Once you've got that running, you can go in and say in the, let's see, in open here, I believe, and then open the project. Assuming you've already downloaded the repository from GitHub, we should be able to find this somewhere here. Should be in my downloads folder on this machine, and basically just go to the root, unpackage it, go to the root, say open. Should not, oh, maybe we need to go in one more level here. Open, and then we have the project, and we can go in here on in the Marlin folder. We can browse all the code, and we can go up to how is it we do that? We go to oh yeah, if we want to build it, we go to terminal, say run build task. We'll have this one. We'll click that, and it'll build the whole thing. Occasionally it fails a build for some reason, especially the first time you run it, so you have to run it the second time before it functions. I'm not sure why. I have made one change that is in the pre-builds that I've released. So if you want to build it yourself, you should probably make the same change. See if I can find it. There is a version check on the where it checks the let's see, what's it called, the version of the firmware on the controller board versus the version of the firmware on the LCD panel, and check if they match. And the problem is I could not find out where he sets that variable in the LCD firmware. So what I simply did was I went in and disabled it. If I can find it, of course I can't find it while I'm recording the video. Do I believe it should be, maybe it's in this one? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Gonna do a search, find LCD version. Nope. It's not in this file then. I believe it should actually be in this one. Okay, I'll cut out all this searching. Oh, here it is. There's this function here in the ADVi3 pp.cpp file. There's a bool called a struct of printer called is LCD version valid constant. And originally it did some stuff here where it speaks with the LCD panel, I believe, and it gets version returned, and then it does some compares. I've simply uncommented or commented this, made it into a comment, and said this always returns true. So I don't get. It doesn't really matter. You just the only thing it does is that you get a warning when you boot up the printer, saying that the versions doesn't match. You can just click away the warning and it will function. But if you don't want that warning, and I have removed it in the pre-builds that I've made available, then you can go in and change this to return true. And then, yeah, I already showed. Then you just go and run the build task, and you will get some hex files. You get these firmware hexes here. There's two versions. There's the i3 Plus and then for the BL Touch. And just go Reveal in Explorer, and I'll show you where it is. And you take that file and you flash it to your printer. I use Octoprint to flash it. You can use Cura. You can use a lot of other stuff. I believe Arduino IDE. Whatever you prefer. That's not really the point of this video. If you don't know how to flash the printer, I mean, you probably shouldn't be messing around with my untested firmwares here. Or more or less untested. Okay, so that's the controller board firmware. Now, if you want to make your own flavor of the LCD firmware, or maybe try updating that project to match the newer versions of the ADVi3++ firmware, the version 4s, then what you need is when you go to, let's see, the GitHub here for the LCD, that should be this one. We can see in resources, yada yada yada, there is this in setup, which is an installer for a development tool used to develop firmwares for this LCD panel specifically. So there's also some guides and stuff. So what you do, you download this whole thing, install that, then you can open this project in the SD folder here with this program, which I have ready here. So we go in and open the project, and then you see it's basically just a series of images, you would think. There's a lot of them, and there's a ton of variables all over the place, because if you go into one of the screens and say property, or well, we need to select something here, you see they have these SP and BP values and in it, and okay, so we'll get into the details of this later, but these correspond to stuff in the controller board firmware where you need to match up all these things if you want to make changes. So the only change that I've made is I replaced the boot up animation with my own, and that's also in the version that I've released just for fun. So other than that, it should be stuck. But yeah, I haven't looked really deep into how this tool functions. I've just replaced these images for fun. You can do that easily yourself because you don't actually need the tool. What you can do is just, well, you've got these 22 pictures, 000 to 021, and you've just replaced those BMPs in the right. It needs to be the right bit depth, it needs to be the right size, and look at how they are made. But I just went into Paint, created a series of images and replaced those, and now my printer shows this when I boot it up. So I thought that was fun. You can easily do it yourself. But if you want more than this number of pictures, you need to use this tool to tell it the animation, it's this one, I believe. It says, okay, we start with the 000. I guess it always boots up with that picture and then figures out what to do from there. And then we have a start image to an end image, and how long time there is between each, yada yada yada. The problem is the main screen here starts at 022, so you would need to move this series of images to a different index. So like above 100, maybe move it up to 900, and then you've got to 900 to 999, and then you can have 100 images. But you need to figure out how this works, and how to get it to return back to the main screen once it's done. I haven't looked into that, to be honest, so just be aware. I don't know how it returns to that exactly, so careful. You can probably pretty easily fuck this up, but of course you can always re-download the project and start over. So yeah, like I said, you take this, or like I've written on the release page at least, in theory, all you should need to do is take a micro SD card, format it with the FAT32 file system, copy the contents, and if you want to do it yourself, the contents is specifically yada yada yada, download master SD, this DVin set folder, and you don't copy the contents of folder, you need to copy the folder, so the path becomes whatever your SD card is /DVin_set/ all the files on your SD card. Okay, and then you can stick that into your printer. I've shown in a previous video how to flash that. You need to disassemble the front of the printer, and then there's an SD card slot on the back of the PCB that contains the touchscreen on the front of the printer. You need to set it into that, then boot up the printer. It'll go through a flashing process. When it's done, remove the SD card, reboot the printer, and you should be good to go. But I've done a previous video on that. Okay, so now we're pretty much back to, you know, where we were 2 years ago when I made that video. What if we wanted to do something more extreme, like update this LCD stuff to match the newest version of his firmware, where he's still making the source code available, which is also part of my repository, but I'm not gonna pull changes probably. That's just the state of the repository the day I cloned it, yesterday or 2 days ago. What if we wanted to update this so we could use the newest firmware? Well, I mean, if you disable that, well, you don't even need to disable a check, but if you installed the old version of the LCD firmware with the new version of the controller board firmware, well, some things will probably work actually, because I've been looking at the code, and I haven't completely disassembled everything to figure out what's going on, to be honest. But I think there is a specific, this file is very important, because if you remember, I showed you these SP and VP things over in the editing software for the LCD panel firmware. Well, what happens is, now we have got a bunch of variables. We've got a bunch of actions here, for instance. So if we go to this and go to one of the screens, well, what you'll find is that actually, like this button, firmware, that sends a VP value. Let's see if I'm reading this right. 040D. That's a hex value. So that is actually right here. So if you wanted to update that, well, first of all, you need to figure out all these values. I mean, what screens. He's added a bunch of functionality, so there'll be some things that that you'll need to add new screens for. Maybe you've changed some values, so like the firmware button might become 40F instead. Then you'll need to correct that, otherwise the firmware button is not going to send you where you think it's going to send you, and so on. So really, I'm not sure the easiest ways to do this, but you need to somehow cross-reference this version of the firmware with the new version of the firmware and look at what's going on with the pictures in this program. So reference those three sources, figure out where the differences is, where have something been added, where have something been changed, where something is still the same. And you could just, you could just adjust the values, so you could use all the functionality that this version of the LCD firmware offers you, but without adding buttons for the new functionality that is in the firmware, which means that kind of functionality will be locked out from the LCD screen. At least you could still access it through a terminal, probably most of it. That's one way to do it. You could update it with all the new functionality, everything, all the things. Then you will need to add pictures and stuff, and then you really get into the point where you need to figure out how this DGUS piece of software, how this works. And honestly, don't really feel up to it, because from the couple of hours I spent studying this piece of software, my honest opinion is that it's a piece of shit. It's really convoluted the way things works. I haven't done this yet, but like if I click one of these, so these are buttons to insert like a new thing into the interface. If I click one of these buttons, any of them, I have not figured out how. Now if I click anything here, then I'm gonna draw a new thing. I have not figured out how to go back to select mode. That should be so simple. Like, okay, no, I don't want to do that. I can't click this button. That doesn't do anything. I can't find a select, like a pointer style option. You think it might be that? No, that's touch control. I cannot figure out how the hell to get back from here without having to shut down a program and start and load up the project again. So like a simple thing like that, I can't figure it out. So in my opinion, I do not want to deal with this piece of software. But if you feel up to it, go right ahead. Like I said, I've cloned the repository, so even if Andrivet decides to delete it, it'll still be available here. Yeah. But like I said, you need this piece of software, load off the project. You need to look at the enums file here in the Marlin folder of the project. I believe it's still called the same thing. You need to cross-reference everything here, and if there's anything that's changed name or been added and stuff, and you want that in the LCD control thing, you need to figure out what does it do by simply figuring out, well, where is it being used in the code and reading the code and so on. And quite honestly, I cannot be bothered. I mean, you go and pay the guy the $1 I think it costs to support that project. What I think is more interesting in this regard is, well, we have it. We could start our own branch from here if we wanted. We can go and do our own entire firmware from this starting off point. That would be nice. or we can just do little fun things like I did. I fixed, I changed the startup animation on my printers. I thought that was fun. And to be able to do that, I don't really feel like I need to pay that guy money. But if you want something that's actually, because I'm mainly just playing around my stuff. Sure, I do want my printers to work, but I mean, yeah, but they're toys in the end. But if you really want, if you want support and you want something that's been tested and that works and got all the latest and greatest features, I mean, go and pay the guy, okay? I'm not saying that you should not support this guy. I'm just saying that it's a little bit annoying that especially the LCD thing is not available anymore. For guys that just want to play around, that's really what I'm trying to say here. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much what I wanted to cover in this video. Just how to actually get access to this thing so that my 2-year-old videos is not quite as obsolete as they have been for 2 years, because like I said, I think it was pretty much just after I released that video that he decided to make it hide the pre-built firmwares behind a paywall. Yeah, so that would be it for this video, guys. Take care.